The flames reached toward the star-scattered sky, like desperate fingers, each ember carrying away fragments of a life that had taken Sarah McKenna 7 years to build. Bound to the weathered oak post at the village's edge, she watched the Comanche lodges collapse one by one, their buffalo hide walls curling and blackening as the U.S. Army's torches did their merciless work. The acrid smoke stung her eyes, but the tears that fell weren't from the fire. They were for the children who had called her Piamua, mother of many, for the women who had taught her to weave and heal, for the life she was about to lose at the hands of her own people. Behind her, Colonel Harrison's voice carried across the chaos. Let that be a lesson to any white woman who chooses savages over civilization. 7 years earlier, Sarah had arrived at Fort Belknap as a 19-year-old bride, her heart full of dreams, and her trunk packed with delicate china that would never survive the Texas frontier. Her husband, Lieutenant James McKenna, was everything her Philadelphia family had hoped for: handsome, ambitious, and utterly convinced that the West was a grand adventure waiting to be conquered. The Comanche raid that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in April. Sarah was hanging laundry when the war cries echoed across the prairie. When the thunder of hoofbeats shook the earth beneath her feet, she remembered the way James had pushed her toward the root cellar, his hands trembling as he pressed his service revolver into her palm. "Stay hidden," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Whatever happens, stay hidden." She never saw him alive again. When the Comanche found her 3 days later, half dead from thirst and terror, she expected to join her husband in whatever came after this life. Instead, she found herself looking into the darkest eyes she had ever seen, belonging to a warrior who spoke perfect English and whose face bore the weathered wisdom of someone who had walked between two worlds. "You have a choice," he said, his voice gentle despite the paint streaking his cheeks. "Come with us and live, or stay here and die with your grief." His name was Ayanna, Eternal Blossom, though the white world had once called him Thomas Whitehorse during his years at the Carlisle Indian School. He was 26. A war chief's son who had returned to his people after watching the white man's education system try to kill the Indian in him. His English was flawless, his understanding of both worlds complete, and his heart, Sarah would learn, was capable of holding more love than she had ever imagined possible. The years between. Life in the Comanche village was nothing like the dime novels had described. There were no savage brutalities, no constant warfare, just people trying to survive in a world that was shrinking around them like a noose. Sarah learned to tan hides until her hands were leather tough, to grind corn until her shoulders ached, to speak Comanche until she dreamed in a language that had no words for ownership or forever. The children came to her first, drawn by her patient ways and the stories she told of a world beyond the prairie. The women followed, teaching her their healing arts, sharing their laughter during the long winter nights. The men accepted her slowly, but they accepted her, all except Ayanna. He watched her from a distance, his dark eyes unreadable, his presence both protective and remote. When she fell sick with fever her first winter, he brought her medicine. When she struggled with the language, he left pictographs that helped her understand. When she wept for her lost life, he sat outside her lodge and played his flute until dawn. "Why do you avoid me?" she asked him one evening, cornering him by the river, where he came to water his horses. He was quiet for a long moment, his hands working the leather reins. "Because you are not meant for this world, Sarah McKenna, and I am not meant for yours. What if I don't want either world? What if I want to create something new?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw the loneliness that lived behind his careful control. "The army will come for you eventually. They always do, and when they come, loving you will be the death of me." But love, Sarah was learning, rarely asked permission. The deepening, it happened gradually, like the changing of seasons, a shared glance across the evening fire, a touch that lingered when he helped her down from her horse, conversations that stretched deep into the night, where he told her about the white school that had tried to strip away his soul, and she told him about the loneliness of being the only woman in a world of men at the fort. "They taught us that our ways were wrong," he said one night, his voice heavy with old pain, "that our language was the devil's tongue, our ceremonies were barbaric, our love for the earth was primitive. They cut our hair and burned our clothes and beat us when we spoke our names." Sarah reached for his hand, feeling the calluses from years of bow work, the small scars from battles fought and won. "But you came back." "I came back because I remembered who I was before they tried to make me someone else." His fingers tightened around hers. "You remind me of that person, Sarah, the one who believed in something beyond survival." Their first kiss tasted of wood smoke and wild honey, of tears and hope and the terrible beauty of loving someone the world would never understand. It happened under a canopy of stars that seemed to bless their union, in a moment that felt stolen from time itself. "I can't promise you anything," he whispered against her lips. "Not safety, not acceptance, not even tomorrow." "I'm not asking for promises," she whispered back. "I'm asking for truth. The golden time. For 3 years they lived in a bubble of happiness that felt both fragile and eternal. Sarah became Piamua when she helped deliver the chief's grandson, her hands steady as she guided new life into the world. Ayana became her husband in a ceremony that blended Comanche tradition with vows they wrote themselves, promising to love each other in this life, and whatever came after. They had no children of their own, a source of quiet sorrow that they rarely spoke of, but they became parents to every child in the village. Sarah taught them to read and write in English, preparing them for a world that was coming whether they wanted it or not. Ayana taught them to hunt and fight and remember, keeping alive the stories that connected them to their ancestors. Their lodge stood at the edge of the village, close enough to be part of the community, but far enough away to create their own small world. Sarah learned to cook buffalo stew and make pemmican, to bead moccasins and weave baskets. Ayana learned to appreciate the Shakespeare sonnets she read aloud, to understand the longing in her voice when she spoke of Philadelphia Springs. "Do you miss it?" he asked one evening as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Miss what?" "Your world. White sheets and china teacups and women who wear their hair in careful curls." Sarah considered this, her head resting against his shoulder. "I miss the idea of it sometimes, the safety of knowing what was expected of me. But I don't miss the loneliness of living a life that never quite fit, and if you could go back, if you could have both worlds." "There is no both worlds, Ayana. There's only the world we make together, and the world that wants to destroy us for making it." The gathering storm. The signs were everywhere for those who knew how to read them. Fewer buffalo each year, their great herds thinning like hair on an old man's head. White settlers pushing further west, their claims marked by barbed wire and backed by bullets. Government agents with their treaties and their promises, their words slippery as river stones. The young warriors wanted to fight. They painted their faces and sharpened their weapons and spoke of glory and honor and dying well. The older men counseled patience, remembering other wars and other defeats, the pattern that always ended the same way. Ayana found himself caught between them, his English education making him valuable as a translator, his warrior's heart making him dangerous as a leader. He attended the council meetings that stretched late into the night, watching his people try to navigate between extinction and surrender. "They want us to go to the reservation," he told Sarah one evening, his voice heavy with exhaustion, "to become farmers and Christians, and forget we were ever Comanche. And if you refuse, then they'll make us refugees in our own land, hunt us down like animals until there's nothing left but stories." Sarah felt the weight of the future pressing down on them, heavy as storm clouds. "What do you want to do?" "I want to take you away from here, north to Canada, or west to California, somewhere we can disappear, and be just a man and woman who love each other. But you won't." "No, I won't abandon my people, and you won't ask me to." He turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "We always knew this day would come, Sarah. We just hoped it would be later." The end of everything. The attack came at dawn on a Tuesday in October, the irony not lost on Sarah as she remembered another Tuesday that had changed her life. The soldiers rode in with the sun at their backs, their brass buttons gleaming like stars, their faces set with the righteous certainty of men who believed they were doing God's work. Colonel Harrison led them, his gray hair perfectly groomed beneath his campaign hat, his voice crisp with authority as he shouted orders. Sarah recognized him from the fort. He had been a captain then, ambitious and hungry for promotion. Now he had his eagles and his chance for glory. The village scattered like leaves in a whirlwind. Women grabbed children and ran for the river. Warriors reached for weapons that were too few and too late. The elderly and sick huddled in their lodges, too proud to run, too weak to fight. Ayana found Sarah by their lodge, his face painted for war, his rifle in his hand. "You have to go," he said, his voice urgent. "Take the black horse and ride for the river. There's a cave about 2 miles downstream. I'm not leaving you. Sarah, please. This is not your fight. It became my fight the day I chose to stay." She gripped his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. "We stay together, or we die together. Those are the only choices I'll accept." He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw him memorize her face, storing it away like a treasure. Then he kissed her, hard and desperate, tasting of blood and goodbye. "I love you," he whispered against her lips, "in this life and the next and all the ones after that." "I love you too," she whispered back. "Now go, your people need you." The betrayal. She was hiding in the root cellar behind the lodge when they found her, her heart hammering against her ribs as she listened to the sounds of her world being destroyed. The soldier who dragged her out was young, maybe 18, his face pale with shock at what he had seen. "Colonel," he called out, "we got a white woman here." Colonel Harrison rode over, his horse dancing nervously in the smoke. When he saw Sarah, his expression shifted from surprise to something darker, more calculating. "Well, well, Sarah McKenna, I remember you from the fort. James McKenna's widow." His voice carried a note of disgust. "Though I suppose widow isn't quite accurate anymore, is it?" Sarah said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. 7 years, Harrison continued, dismounting from his horse. 7 years you've been living among these savages, playing at being one of them. Do you have any idea what you've done, what you represent? I represent nothing but myself, Sarah said, finding her voice at last. You represent betrayal, Harrison snapped. You represent every fear white families have about the frontier. You represent weakness and depravity and the complete breakdown of Christian morality. Around them, the village burned. Bodies lay scattered in the dust, and Sarah could hear the distant sound of weeping. Somewhere in that chaos, Ayanna was fighting for his people, maybe dying for them. You're going to help us send a message, Harrison said, gesturing to his men. Tie her to that post. Let every savage in Texas see what happens to white women who choose their side. The long night. The ropes bit into her wrists as the hours passed, the smoke and flames painting the night in shades of hell. Sarah watched her life burn, each collapsing lodge taking with it a memory, a friendship, a piece of her heart. The soldiers made camp upwind of the smoke, their laughter carrying across the destruction as they shared bottles of whiskey and stories of their victory. They had lost 3 men, wounded 5 more, and killed or scattered an entire village. By military standards, it was a resounding success. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to find Ayanna in the chaos. She had seen him fall during the fighting, a soldier's bullet finding its mark, but she had also seen him rise again, his face a mask of blood and determination. The warriors who survived had melted away into the darkness, taking their wounded with them, disappearing into the landscape like smoke. You chose this, Colonel Harrison said, appearing beside her as midnight approached. You chose them over your own kind, and now you'll die for it. In the morning we'll march you back to civilization as an example. Let every white woman see what becomes of those who betray their race. The only betrayal here is yours, Sarah said, her voice hoarse from smoke. You're the one who broke the treaties. You're the one who came here to kill women and children. I came here to protect civilization from savagery, Harrison replied. You wouldn't understand. You've been among them too long. He walked away, leaving her alone with the dying fires and the weight of everything she had lost. Sarah tilted her head back and looked at the stars, the same stars she had wished on as a child in Philadelphia, the same stars she had learned to navigate by during her years on the prairie. Ayanna, she thought, sending the prayer up into the darkness. If you're alive, stay alive. Don't come back for me. Live, and remember, and tell our story to whoever will listen. The return. She heard the flute first, soft and low, a melody that seemed to float on the night wind like a ghost song. Sarah's heart stopped, then began beating so hard she was sure the guards would hear it. But the soldiers slept on, exhausted by their day of destruction, confident in their victory. The music grew closer, and Sarah saw him emerge from the shadows like something out of a dream. Ayanna moved like smoke, like memory, like hope itself. His left arm hung useless at his side. Blood had dried on his face, and his eyes held the terrible emptiness of a man who had lost everything. But he was alive, and he had come back for her. He put a finger to his lips, then produced a knife from his belt. The blade was sharp, honed to a razor's edge, and it sliced through her bonds like they were spider silk. Sarah bit back a cry of pain as the circulation returned to her hands, pins and needles shooting up her arms. Can you walk? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. Together they moved away from the dying fires, away from the sleeping soldiers, away from the ruins of their life. Ayanna had 2 horses waiting in a grove of cottonwoods by the river, their hooves wrapped in buffalo hide to muffle the sound. Where? Sarah asked as he helped her onto the black mare. North, he said simply. To the nations. They can't follow us there. They rode in silence for an hour, putting distance between themselves and the army camp. Only when they reached the high bluffs overlooking the river did Ayanna finally speak. I'm dying, Sarah. She reined in her horse, her heart lurching. What? The bullet. It's still in me, and I'm bleeding inside. I can feel it. His voice was calm, matter of fact, but Sarah could hear the pain beneath the words. I have maybe hours, maybe less. No, the word came out as a sob. No, I won't accept that. We'll find a doctor, or I'll take the bullet out myself. I've learned healing. Sarah. He reached out and touched her face, his fingers gentle despite their trembling. Look at me. She looked, and saw the truth in his eyes, saw the gray pallor of his skin, the way he held himself to keep from falling from his horse, saw the love that burned there, bright and fierce and final. I came back for you because I couldn't bear the thought of you dying alone, he said, because I needed to tell you that these 7 years were worth everything, worth every hardship, every loss, every moment of fear. You gave me a life I never thought I could have, Ayanna, and because I need you to live, Sarah. I need you to carry our story forward, to remember not just the ending but the middle, the good parts, the love. They made camp in a hidden canyon, one of the secret places Ayanna had known since childhood. Sarah built a small fire and boiled water, cleaning his wound as best she could, but they both knew it was too late. The bullet had torn through too much, and the bleeding wouldn't stop. Tell me about Philadelphia, he said as the dawn light began to creep across the sky. So she did. She told him about cobblestone streets and gas lamps, about her mother's garden and her father's bookshop, about snow falling on church bells and the sound of carriage wheels on wet pavement. She told him about the girl she had been, lonely and restless, and searching for something she couldn't name. "I was searching for you," she said, holding his hand as his breathing grew shallow. "I just didn't know it yet. And I was searching for someone who would see me as more than just a warrior or a student or a bridge between worlds," he whispered back. "Someone who would love all the broken pieces." The sun was rising, painting the canyon walls in shades of gold and rose. When Ayanna drew his last breath, he died looking into Sarah's eyes, his face peaceful at last, his hand still warm in hers. Sarah held him as the morning light filled the canyon, rocking back and forth, her tears falling like rain on his beloved face. She sang the Comanche death song his grandmother had taught her, her voice carrying across the empty spaces, a lament for love and loss, and the terrible beauty of being human. The message. Sarah McKenna lived for 37 more years after that dawn in the canyon. She made her way north to the Cherokee Nation, where she became a teacher and healer, working with children who had been torn between worlds just as she had been. She never remarried, never spoke of her years with the Comanche to anyone who wouldn't understand. But she wrote, in journals and letters, in stories and poems, she preserved the truth of what she had lived. She wrote about a love that transcended race and culture and the narrow definitions of civilization. She wrote about a man who had loved her enough to die for her, and a woman who had loved him enough to live for him. In her final journal entry, written the night before she died peacefully in her sleep, Sarah McKenna wrote these words: "They will tell you that love is not enough, that it cannot bridge the gaps between worlds, cannot overcome the barriers of race and culture and history. They will tell you that some divides are too wide to cross, some differences too great to reconcile. But I have seen love move mountains. I have seen it build bridges across chasms that seemed impossible to span. I have seen it transform enemies into family, strangers into soulmates, the lost into the found. Love is not enough to change the world, perhaps, but it is enough to change two hearts, and two hearts can change a family, and a family can change a community, and a community can change the world. In the end, love is not about possession or permanence. It is about recognition, seeing yourself reflected in another soul, and knowing that you are not alone in this vast and beautiful and terrible universe. It is about choosing to be brave enough to be vulnerable, to risk everything for the chance to touch another heart. Ayanna and I had 7 years out of a lifetime, 7 years stolen from the hatred and fear that surrounded us, 7 years of laughter and tears, and the ordinary magic of two people building a life together. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Love transcends all boundaries, because it exists outside of time and space, and the small, cruel categories we use to divide ourselves from one another. It exists in the space between heartbeats, in the pause between breaths, in the moment when two souls recognize each other across the vastness of human experience and say, yes, you, always you. That recognition is the closest thing to immortality we will ever know. Epilogue. Colonel Harrison received his promotion to general and spent the rest of his career chasing ghosts across the frontier. He never spoke publicly about the white woman who had disappeared from his custody, but those who knew him said he seemed haunted by something he could never quite name. The Comanche village was never rebuilt, but wildflowers grew there every spring, painting the prairie in brilliant colors that seemed to dance in the wind like spirits celebrating. Local ranchers said the land was cursed, but the flowers suggested otherwise. They suggested something that transcended curses and blessings alike. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind was just right, travelers passing through would hear the faint sound of a flute playing in the distance, a melody that spoke of love and loss and the eternal hope that somewhere, somehow, hearts that have touched will touch again.